I'm thinking about going up to the mountains later, see if I can catch the sunset.
Hello? Yes, I'm still here. I was just listening to the birds.
Yeah, I'm here. It's all clear for now, but stay alert.
Hello, how are you today?
We are doing well, thank you for asking.
Yes, just enjoying the beautiful weather and selling some watermelons. I've always loved these fields, especially at this time of year when everything is so green.
These are freshly picked this morning.
Wow, they look wonderful. How much for 2 bags?
And I'll take one too.
I've always loved these fields, especially at this time of year when everything is so green. The water is so clear today, and I hope the fish are biting. We can sit here for a while and just enjoy the scenery. This watermelon is so refreshing on a warm day.
The story opened under a sky that seemed deceptively calm, the early sun spilling across the countryside as if promising peace, when, in truth, shadows of conflict had already begun to stir. James, the man known to many as a fearless CEO, carried inside him a storm that never truly rested. For wherever he went, danger seemed to follow, especially now that John, freshly released from prison, had re-entered the world like a serpent, uncoiling from years of captivity. At the same time, Diep was far away in her uncle's farmstead, plucking ripe watermelons from vines still wet with morning dew, her hands busy, but her heart unsettled by the strange tension she felt creeping across her days. Unbeknownst to her, eyes were watching, schemes were forming, and the delicate balance of safety she thought she had gained was already starting to crack. James had never been one to ignore the undercurrents of business and betrayal. Earlier that morning, he had received disturbing news. The wood markets, upon which his company heavily relied, had experienced inexplicable price hikes. Every supplier seemed to be acting in unison, raising costs beyond reason, squeezing him into a corner. Though his people whispered theories, James knew deep down there could only be one explanation: John. It was just the kind of ruthless strategy John would employ, striking not through direct confrontation at first, but by cutting off the lifeblood of his opponent's enterprise. Yet James also understood that money and wood were not the only things John desired. The most dangerous weapon John could wield was Diep herself, and that realization made his pulse pound with a mix of fear and fury. Far across the city, inside a dimly lit house that smelled faintly of old cigarettes and damp stone, John sat with his father, their faces set in grim lines. "James terminated our contract," the son muttered, his voice clipped but burning. His father, once a powerful figure, but now grizzled and weary from both crime and years, merely narrowed his eyes. "Don't worry," he rasped. "You still have a piece to play. Her name is Diep." At that moment, John's lips twisted into a thin smile that lacked warmth. He did not need to be reminded. He already knew that the woman was James's weakness, the hidden vein of gold in his armor. "Then we'll find her," John promised, his hand tightening into a fist. "And once she's in my grasp, James will kneel." Back at the farm, Diep crouched by the vines, humming softly as she filled her basket. She had been away from James for some time now, the distance between them carved not only by physical miles, but by unspoken misunderstandings that lingered like fog. Though she often missed him, there was a quiet comfort in the simplicity of this rural life. The sound of chickens scratching in the dirt, the earthy scent of soil, the calm rhythm of days spent selling produce at the market. Yet even as she tried to embrace that peace, her uncle's absence weighed on her. He was often away, leaving her to manage the farm, and though she was capable, she felt a fragile thread of unease tug at her spirit. That morning, as she brushed dirt from a particularly large melon, her phone buzzed. James's name lit up the screen. When she answered, his voice carried both affection and warning. "Where are you?" he asked gently, but urgently. She told him she was at the farm planning to sell melons at the market later. His reply was sharp. "Don't go out, Diep. It's too dangerous." She laughed softly, trying to lighten his worry, but she could hear the edge in his tone, could feel the protective wall he always tried to build around her. "I'll be fine," she reassured him, though her words rang hollow even to her own ears. For James had instincts sharpened by years of facing men like John, and those instincts rarely failed him. Meanwhile, James himself stood among the half-empty storerooms of his lumber company, staring at stacks of timber that would not last long. His associate, a loyal man named Hung, rushed in with fresh updates. More suppliers had refused to deal with them, claiming orders were redirected or resources suddenly scarce. The truth was clear. John had stretched invisible threads across the marketplace, turning once reliable partners into tools of his game. James clenched his jaw. He knew he could weather financial storms, but what he could not allow was John using this business war as a cover to move against Diep. His thoughts returned to her constantly, tugging at him like a tether he could not cut. That evening, while the world outside seemed to fall into its habitual rhythm, John's men were already moving. They had spotted Diep at the market, her figure small against the bustle of sellers shouting prices and buyers haggling for fruit. She smiled politely at customers, weighed melons with practiced ease, and offered change with hands that did not yet know they were marked. From a distance, two of John's followers watched her every move, sending updates back to him. "She's here," one whispered into his phone. "We'll track her when she leaves." John's reply came cold and fast. "Do not lose her. Tonight, I want to know where she sleeps." Diep sold out all her melons by late afternoon, her small table now empty, except for the dust left behind by coins and fruit. She felt a small satisfaction. Earning money honestly had a sweetness far richer than the melons she sold. Yet as she tied her scarf and prepared to walk home, she had the uneasy sensation of being observed. She glanced around, the faces of strangers, merchants packing up, children chasing each other between stalls. Nothing unusual, yet the feeling gnawed at her. She quickened her pace, her basket clutched tightly to her side, unaware of the two men trailing at a distance, their steps careful, their eyes fixed. James's phone rang just as he stepped out of a tense meeting. It was Diep again, her voice casual as she told him she had sold all her melons and was heading home. Relief brushed through him, but it was quickly replaced by dread when she mentioned offhandedly that she thought someone might have been watching her. His voice sharpened immediately. "Listen to me, Diep. Don't take the usual road home. Go straight to your uncle's house and lock the doors. I'll be there as soon as I can." She hesitated, wanting to argue, but the iron weight of his tone silenced her. She promised to be careful, but the promise was barely enough to soothe the storm rising inside him. John, meanwhile, leaned back in his chair, phone pressed to his ear, the report coming in exactly as he expected. "She's on her way home," the spy whispered. John's smile returned, a cruel curve in the dim light of his hideout. "Good," he murmured. "Let her think she's safe. Tomorrow or the day after, we strike." His father, seated nearby, nodded grimly. For them, this was more than revenge. It was a chance to dismantle James's world piece by piece, starting with the woman he loved most. James drove that night through narrow roads, headlights cutting through the countryside darkness. His chest tightened as he imagined Diep's face, her laughter, her quiet strength. He'd already lost too much in battles past. He could not, would not, allow John to steal her from him. As the farm came into view, lit faintly by the moon, he whispered a vow into the night air. This time, I will not lose. The following morning rose under a pale haze, the countryside blanketed in mist that curled lazily around the treetops and rice paddies. Diep awoke earlier than usual, stirred by an inexplicable heaviness in her chest, as if her dreams had carried shadows into her waking hours. She prepared breakfast for herself, simple rice porridge and tea, yet her hands moved slower than normal, distracted by thoughts of James's urgent voice the night before. His warning had etched itself into her mind, and though she tried to convince herself she was overthinking, she could not escape the sensation that someone had been close, perhaps too close, at the market. Even as she stirred the pot, her eyes drifted toward the window again and again, scanning the horizon as though danger might materialize from the fog. James, on the other hand, had barely slept. He spent most of the night at his desk, eyes burning as he scoured reports of the wood suppliers, making calls to those who might still be loyal, piecing together the threads of John's interference. Yet no amount of strategy could distract him from the one thought that consumed him. Diep was in the crosshairs. He could almost feel John's presence circling her, waiting for the right moment to strike. At dawn, James rose, buttoned his crisp shirt, and made the decision he should have made long before. He would bring Diep closer, no matter her resistance, because leaving her exposed was no longer an option. Far from James's office, in a crumbling house on the edge of the city, John sat in silence while his men reported back. They had followed Diep home but dared not approach, for James's reputation loomed even in absence. Still, they had gathered enough. Her route to the market, the narrow path she preferred along the river, the hours she usually returned. John's mind was already turning the information into a trap. "We wait until she believes she's untouchable," he muttered, his voice like gravel. His father, sipping bitter tea, gave a low chuckle. "She's his weakness. If you have her, you control him." John's eyes glimmered dangerously. "Not just control," he said. "I'll break him." Diep's day continued as normal, or so she tried to convince herself. She ventured into the orchard, gathering ripe guavas and checking the vines. Nee, the little girl she had grown close to over the months, skipped beside her, laughing as she tried to reach for fruits too high. Diep smiled, but her heart remained troubled, for Nee's innocence only reminded her of how fragile everything truly was. She thought of James, his strength, his promises, his love that often felt like both a shield and a chain. She wanted to believe they were safe, yet the countryside suddenly seemed less like a refuge and more like a waiting trap. By midday, James arrived at the farm. His car crunched across the gravel, the sound startling chickens into a frenzy. When Diep saw him, relief washed over her, though she masked it with a soft smile. "You didn't have to come all this way," she said, trying to hide her worry. But James stepped closer, his expression unyielding. "I had to," he replied. "Things are moving faster than I expected. John's men are here." Diep's breath caught. Though part of her had suspected, hearing it confirmed sent a shiver through her. James reached for her hand, his grip firm. "From now on, you're not to go to the market alone. Promise me." She wanted to argue, to insist on her independence, but the intensity in his eyes silenced her. She nodded, though her heart ached at the thought of losing even the small freedoms she cherished. That night, the household was heavy with silence. James lingered near the window, watching the road outside, as though expecting shadows to rise from it. Diep sat with Nee, reading softly, though her voice trembled every so often. When Nee finally drifted to sleep, Diep approached James, placing a hand on his arm. "You can't protect me from everything," she whispered. "And if you try too hard, you'll suffocate me." James turned, his gaze conflicted, torn between love and fear. "I'd rather suffocate you with love than lose you to him," he admitted. The rawness of his words pierced her heart, and she realized that beneath his steel exterior, he was terrified, not of John, but of the possibility of losing the only person who had anchored him. Meanwhile, John was preparing his move. He had no intention of waiting too long, for patience was not his strength. He dispatched a team of men to shadow the farm from different angles, testing the defenses, noting when James arrived and when he left. He wanted to strike when Diep was most vulnerable, preferably when James was away, tied up in the endless business battles that John himself had ignited. Each report fed John's hunger for revenge, and with each hour, the plan sharpened like a blade. 2 days later, James was forced into the city for an urgent meeting. Despite his reluctance, he left behind additional security. Trusted men he stationed discreetly around the farm. He kissed Diep's forehead before leaving, his words low and deliberate. "Lock every door. Don't open for anyone but me." She nodded, though unease fluttered in her chest like a trapped bird. As his car disappeared down the road, the world suddenly felt too quiet, too exposed. Diep tried to busy herself. She and Nee picked vegetables, laughing lightly to chase away fear. But when the sun dipped toward the horizon, the atmosphere shifted. The dogs barked furiously, their growls echoing across the fields. Diep's heart thudded as she ushered Nye inside, bolting the door. From the window, she thought she saw movement near the trees, a flicker of figures that did not belong. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone to call James, but the signal was faint, cutting in and out. Her whispered plea barely carried through. "James, they're here." In the city, James felt his blood run cold as the line crackled. He didn't need full words to understand. Diep was in danger. Without hesitation, he abandoned the meeting, sprinting to his car, barking orders to his men through clenched teeth. "Get to the farm, now." His driver slammed on the accelerator, the city lights blurring as they sped into the countryside. Every second stretched like an eternity, his mind tormenting him with visions of what John might be doing, what Diep might be enduring. At the farm, the shadows grew bolder. John's men circled the house, testing the doors, peering through windows. Diep clutched Nye close, whispering reassurances she barely believed herself. When the first knock thundered against the door, her body jolted. "Open up," a voice growled. She did not answer. Another knock came, harder, angrier, then silence. For a long, unbearable moment, the only sound was her own heartbeat. Suddenly, glass shattered at the back. Diep screamed, dragging Nee toward the inner room. Footsteps pounded across the wooden floor as intruders forced their way in. Her eyes darted desperately, searching for escape, but there was none. The house was too small, too exposed. She backed against the wall, her arms wrapped protectively around the trembling child. Just as one of the men advanced, a deafening roar filled the night. The sound of engines, of cars screeching to a halt outside. Lights flooded the yard as James's men arrived, their shouts splitting the darkness. Chaos erupted as intruders scrambled, some fleeing, others caught in the sudden clash. Amid the noise, Diep held Nye tighter, tears streaking her cheeks as she prayed James would arrive before it was too late. And then, through the frenzy, she heard it. The unmistakable sound of his voice, shouting her name, fierce and unyielding. Relief surged through her veins like fire. James had come, but John had expected this. From a distance, hidden among the trees, he watched the chaos unfold with a twisted smile. This was only the beginning. He wanted James to feel the fear, to taste the terror of almost losing her, for when the final blow came, it would break him completely. The night was alive with echoes of chaos, yet in the middle of it all, Diep clung to Nee and whispered desperate promises that they would survive. Outside, headlights swept across the yard, illuminating figures scattering like frightened animals. James's men shouted orders, the metallic clang of weapons and the pounding of boots filling the air. Diep pressed her back against the wall, trembling as she waited for James himself to appear. And then, through the broken doorway, he stormed in, eyes burning, jaws set, his entire presence radiating fury and resolve. For a brief second, their eyes met, and she saw both relief and torment within him. He rushed to her side, pulling her and Ly into his arms, as though shielding them with his very body. "I'm here," he murmured fiercely. "I'll never let them take you." The reunion was short-lived, for danger still surrounded them. From outside, the sound of an engine roared. One of John's trucks barreling through the gates, headlights blazing like a predator's eyes. James cursed under his breath, shoving Diep behind him. His men scrambled into position, but the truck skidded to a halt and disgorged several more of John's hired thugs, each armed and ready. The air crackled with violence. James grabbed a length of iron pipe from the wreckage of the doorway and stood his ground. "You'll have to get through me first," he barked, voice like thunder. The intruders hesitated, for James's reputation was known even among criminals. Yet their orders were clear. Diep was the prize, and John would not forgive failure. In the melee that followed, James fought with the ferocity of a man defending not just his love, but his very soul. The pipe became an extension of his will, striking down those who dared to approach. Diep, clutching knee, hid in the corner, eyes wide with terror as she watched the man she loved unleash a storm of defiance. But even James could not be everywhere at once. Two of the thugs slipped around the back, forcing their way toward her. Her heart froze as one reached for her arm, his grip like a vice. She screamed, but before he could drag her away, James appeared, slamming into the man with a force that sent him sprawling. He pulled Diep close again, his breath ragged. "I told you, no one touches you." The attackers, bloodied and battered, finally retreated, their courage broken by James's relentless defense. Tires screeched as the truck reversed, disappearing into the darkness. For a moment, the night fell quiet, broken only by the ragged breathing of the survivors. Diep collapsed against James, sobbing into his chest, while Ly clung to her like a frightened kitten. James stroked their hair, whispering reassurances, even as his own body trembled with adrenaline. "It's over," he said softly. Yet deep down, he knew it wasn't. This was only John's opening move. Indeed, miles away, John seethed as he listened to his men stammer excuses. He had expected resistance, but not such ferocity. James had proven harder to break than anticipated. Still, John's smile returned, cruel and cold. "Good," he murmured. "Let him think he's won. Next time, we won't miss." His father nodded grimly, warning him not to underestimate a man fighting for love. But John only laughed. "Love is weakness, and I'll use it until he begs me to end it." Days passed, heavy with unease. James fortified the farm with guards, cameras, and alarms, yet the sense of safety remained fragile. Diep found herself jumping at shadows, her nights filled with restless dreams. She longed for the simplicity of her old life, yet she also knew there was no going back. She was bound to James now, in love and in danger. One evening, as they sat beneath the stars, she confessed her fears. "What if he never stops?" she whispered. James took her hands, his gaze unwavering. "Then we'll never stop fighting. But you are not alone anymore. As long as I breathe, you're protected." His words comforted her, though part of her still feared what John might do next. That fear proved justified when John's next strike came not with brute force, but with cunning. He arranged for a message to reach James, an anonymous letter left on his desk, containing a single photograph of Diep at the market, unaware she was being watched. Scrawled beneath were the words, "You can't guard her forever." James's fists clenched, rage boiling within him. He wanted to storm John's lair and end it once and for all, but his advisors counseled caution. John was baiting him, waiting for him to act rashly. Still, James could not sit idly by. He doubled his efforts, building alliances, cutting off John's resources, striking at him in the business world while guarding his heart at home. But John had grown desperate. His empire was crumbling under James's counterattacks, and his thirst for revenge consumed him. One stormy night, he enacted his boldest plan yet. Masked men infiltrated the farm under cover of rain, slipping past defenses with inside knowledge. Before anyone realized, Diep was taken, dragged from her bed, while Ly screamed in terror. By the time James reached her room, the windows were shattered, the night swallowing her cries. His heart shattered as he realized John had finally succeeded. What followed was a nightmare. James tore through the countryside, following every lead, interrogating every informant, driven by a desperation that bordered on madness. Days blurred into nights, his body weakened, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. Diep, meanwhile, found herself trapped in a cold warehouse, guarded by John's men. John visited often, his words dripping venom. "Do you see now?" he sneered. "He can't save you. He's powerless." But Diep, though terrified, held firm. "You don't understand love," she whispered, "and that's why you'll lose." Her faith was rewarded when James finally discovered her location. With a team of loyal men, he stormed the warehouse at dawn. The battle was fierce. Gunfire, shouting, the clash of wills. James fought like a man possessed, cutting a path toward Diep. When at last he reached her, breaking the chains that bound her, their embrace was like the meeting of two souls reforged by fire. "I told you," James breathed, tears mingling with rain and sweat. "I'll always find you." But John was not finished. He confronted them in the warehouse, rage contorting his face. The final confrontation was brutal. Two men locked in combat, their fists fueled by years of hatred and love. John fought dirty, but James fought with purpose, every blow carrying the weight of his promise to Diep. In the end, John lay defeated, his empire shattered, his cruelty undone by the very love he mocked. As dawn broke, James led Diep and Ly back into the light. The war was over, though scars remained. They returned to the farm, rebuilt what was broken, and found strength in each other. Diep often looked at James with quiet awe, knowing that his love had faced down darkness and prevailed. Ly, too, thrived, her laughter filling the home once more. Together, they forged a new life, not free from trials, but unbreakable in unity. The story closed not with triumph alone, but with a promise. For as James held Diep beneath the rising sun, he whispered, "Whatever comes, we face it together, always." And in that moment, surrounded by the echoes of past battles and the warmth of future hope, they knew their love had endured the storm and would endure every storm to come.